Okay, great. Okay, so today we're talking about the three branches of government, obviously. And I'm going to go through each of these issues that you can see on the first slide. So I'll go more into detail. Okay, why was the government set up this way? The major purpose was to protect against tyranny. And for that purpose, the U.S. Constitution requires a system of separation of powers to ensure checks and balances. And I'm going to explain all of those right now. Okay, so protect against tyranny. A tyranny is a cruel and oppressive government, and another term that might be more familiar is dictatorship. Our founding fathers knew a lot about tyrants, and that is the reason that they fought the Revolutionary War, which is also called the War of Independence. They wanted to get out from under a dictatorship, which at the time was Great Britain, which was ruled by King George III. In their Declaration of Independence, where they were declaring that they wanted to be free from this tyranny, the founding fathers list the king's many crimes against America, and which they felt was an absolute tyranny over the United States, and because they wanted to create a democracy. At the time, I'm sorry.
No, I'm listening.
Okay. At the time, they felt that King George had absolute power over them. And what that means is that the king holds all the power and can do whatever he pleases, and that they had no say in their own government. Okay, so what the system that they set up in the U.S. Constitution was a separation of powers. And when they were writing the Constitution, it took from 1787 to 1789. The U.S. Constitution set up our system of government. And the goal was to prevent tyranny, like I said, or dictatorship, by creating three branches of government. And in this way, they set up a separation of powers and checks and balances. So let's just take a look at a graphic here. Three branches are the legislative, executive, and judicial. Basically, the legislative makes laws. It's made up of Congress, which is made up of the Senate and House of Representatives. The executive carries out the laws, made up of the president, the vice president, and cabinet. And judicial, which interprets the laws or decides what the laws mean, is made up of the Supreme Court and then the other federal courts, which are like the appeals and the district courts. Okay, so again, legislative, executive, and judicial branches are the three branches. Each branch has its own specific job. Again, legislative makes the laws, executive carries out the laws, judicial decides what the laws mean. And the Constitution spells out each branch's powers. Okay, what does the separation of powers means? It means that each branch has one key job so that no one branch can become too powerful, because as I said before, they were very concerned about avoiding becoming a dictatorship. That was their major idea. That was the major idea behind this. And this idea is called the separation of powers. Checks and balances. Each branch has a certain amount of authority over the other branches. And so this balances the power among them so that no one branch can become too powerful. It's really a pretty smart way of doing things so that they don't want the president to become too powerful, or Congress, or the courts. And so this concept is called checks and balances. Checks basically means limitations, limiting the power of the other branches. So it's like a balance of power. Okay, the legislative branch, again, like I said, is Congress, which passes the laws. It has two houses, the Senate and the House of Representatives. And the Senate has 100 senators. So every state has 2 senators from each state, which we vote for. The people vote for. And the House of Representatives has 435 representatives. And the senators serve for 6 years and the representatives for 2 years. Each state has a different number depending on its population. So, like California and New York will have a lot more because they're much bigger states, whereas like Wyoming has only a few because there aren't many people living there. There are also 6 non-voting members from Washington, D.C., Puerto Rico, and 4 overseas territories like the U.S. Virgin Islands and Guam. And like I said, American voters elect the members of each house. Just going to take a sip of water. Okay. All right. Okay, let's look at the executive branch a little more. The executive branch carries out the laws passed by the legislative branch. This branch is led by the president and vice president, by currently President Trump and Vice President Pence, Mike Pence, are the president and vice president currently. And then there's a whole range, there's like 14 or 15 departments right now that help the president run the country. That includes labor, education, defense departments. There's the oh, hi Sabrina. We're in the middle right now, but I'm glad you're here. And labor, education, defense, there's Homeland Security. So you might have heard of some of these. Health and Human Services Department. The heads of the departments are called secretaries, and these are members of the president's cabinet. They serve an advisory role, so they provide him advice on various issues. Do you have any questions so far, Lana or Sabrina?
No.
Any questions? Okay. Okay, so their term of office, the president and vice president can only serve 4 years for each term, but they can be reelected to a second 4-year term. And this year is an election year, of course, and so we're going to be voting to either continue President Trump's term in November or to elect a new president. And right now, Joe Biden is running against President Trump. So we'll either elect Joe Biden or we'll elect President Trump for a second term. This was actually a very radical idea when the Constitution was written, because the kings served for life unless they were overthrown, in a big rebellion. And that did happen. There was a revolution in France, for example. And why did they do this? Because this was a reaction to the absolute power held by the kings in Europe, who could stay just as long as they wanted. And at that time, most countries in Europe had monarchies, was just another word for kingdoms. The writers of the Constitution did not want to place too much power in one person's hand, which can be dangerous because they could do whatever they wanted, and they did not want to deal with that again. They were very upset about some of the things that were going on, like they called like taxation without representation. They felt they were being taxed too much and without any say on their part. That was one of the things they disliked.
We're kind of going through that now.
Yeah, right. Yes. That was one of their major beefs, was too much tax. It was a slogan, taxation without representation. Okay, so the judicial branch is the top court in the land, is the Supreme Court, and that is the head of the judicial branch and the highest court in the nation. And then there's lower federal courts, which in every state has some federal courts. So those are the district and appeals courts. And they determine whether a law passed by Congress follows the Constitution. So whether it's unconstitutional or constitutional. They also decide what the laws mean and how they should be applied. Okay, so how do checks and balances work? Again, limitations and balance of power. Let's look first at the executive branch. Okay, the executive branch can check or limit the power of the legislative branch, Congress, by vetoing a bill or rejecting a bill. A bill is a proposed law, and it can also check the judicial branch by appointing the Supreme Court and other federal judges. So, yeah, that's again, these are all different ways to limit the other branches so no one can gain too much power. Okay, what can the legislative branch do to limit the power of the other branches? Okay, legislative branch again is Congress. They can check the executive branch by overriding or overturning the president's veto of a bill, which is a proposed law. So what happens is when Congress passes a bill, both houses have to pass a bill, Senate and the House of Representatives, which in itself is not always easy. And then they send it to the president. But if the president doesn't like the law, he sends it back to Congress. And if they still like the law, they can vote to overturn the president's veto. And they can vote again, but that rarely happens because they need 2/3 of both houses to again vote for the bill. And usually the president's party will not go against the president. It just does not happen very often, but they can do that. So if 2/3 vote for the bill, it will become law. Congress also has the power to approve government spending, the budget. So it can refuse to give government or the executive branch the money for its favorite programs. And it also has power over the judicial branch because the Senate must approve the president's appointments to the federal courts. And it can also remove judges, which is called impeachment, which also does not happen very often, very rare, but it has happened. Okay, any questions at all about this? No?
No.
Okay. Okay, finally, checks and balances for the judicial branch. Okay, checks by the courts, the judicial branch courts, the same exact thing. Okay, they can limit the legislative and executive branches through what is called judicial review. This means the Supreme Court and other federal courts can decide whether a law passed by Congress follows the Constitution. You might have heard of that. A law makes its way up through the courts to the Supreme Court, and they decide whether this law follows the Constitution. And of course, that's their interpretation. If there were other people on the Supreme Court, they might decide a different way. So, but whoever's on the court decides. And there are nine people on the Supreme Court, and sometimes they're very close. If it's 5-4, then that's how they decide. Then their decision is the law of the land. And it often is 5-4. If the court rules that the law is unconstitutional, the executive branch must stop enforcing the law. So it's overturned by a vote. It can be one person can decide to overturn the law when it's 5-4. So, the Supreme Court has a lot of power.
That's a problem.
Yeah, it is something. No, really, it really is, because there have been some major, major decisions that have been decided by one person on the Supreme Court. They do have a lot of power that way. And, Congress can decide to write a new law, but a lot of laws will end up in the Supreme Court, and one person can overturn that law. And it has a lot of impact on all of our lives, actually.
So it's
Okay.
kind of.
Sorry, go ahead.
It seems like it's kind of defeating the purpose to have three different, like an executive, a judicial, and a legislative branch, when they're really basically do the same thing that they were essentially designed to avoid. So it's kind of.
The idea is not to let anyone get too powerful, because like in this case, when I said they can overturn the law, then Congress can go back and develop a law that will be accepted by the Supreme Court. Do you see what I mean? So Congress, but they have to make sure that it will be constitutional. And so in this way, there's a lot of fights. It's not always this clean. It doesn't always work out really systematically like you see here. But the whole idea is to keep any one branch of government from becoming too powerful. But, there's always complaints. Like, some people feel that President Trump is trying to take too much power. But, when the Republican is a president, the Democrats think the Republican president's taking too much power. When it's a Democrat who's a president, the Republicans think the president's trying to take too much power. So it's always like that. But in effect, our democracy has lasted for over 200 years, and we have yet to become a dictatorship. So in a sense, it's working, but there's always been, issues involved with too much power, and people complaining about too much power on the part of any one branch of government. So there will always be complaint, but we have managed to keep our democracy.
Even though they're like three different branches,
Mm-hmm.
that control everything, but it seems like they're, like I said, what they were designed to do is not really benefiting us that are not in government. They're benefiting themselves. That's how I see it. So it's like everything that they're doing is it's kind of it's like a paradox of lunacy. It's like they're doing the exact opposite of what they were designed to do. They're canceling each other out, but it's not trickling down to like us. Like they left Europe.
Yeah, no, I agree because you're right. Sometimes what they're doing does not benefit the people. Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. Yeah, there are things that they've done that absolutely do not benefit the people. And because the people with the loudest voices are often lobbyists, with lobbyists from corporations or other big organizations that they don't always keep the public interest in mind. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, yeah. So it's not really this the same thing that they impose on us is the very same reason why they came here to separate from Britain. They're doing the exact same thing.
Yes, right. And sometimes they have too much power without taking the public interest. And actually, a big problem is that sometimes they're more concerned about being reelected than doing the right thing for the country. That is a big issue because um, campaigns, to run a campaign when they run for office, it's very, very expensive to run for office. And so they need a lot of money. So for money, they turn to people with the wealthiest, whether it's corporations or people who have the most money, and those are the interests that get the
Represent.
attention. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so those are the people that get most of the attention, are people with a lot of money. And you're right, they don't always keep the country's best interests in mind. So yeah, I know what you're saying. And that's a big complaint. That's always been a big complaint among the average person, is that they don't keep our interests in mind as much as the people with the most money. So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a good point. Good point. Okay. Okay, so vocabulary, just to review again, tyranny is a cruel and oppressive government. Constitution, a founding document of the US that set up our system of government. Separation of powers, the division of power among the three branches of government so none of them becomes too powerful. Checks and balances, the balance of power among the three branches, with each branch limiting the power of the other branches. Okay, again, branches of government: legislative makes the laws, executive carries out the laws, judicial interprets laws. A monarchy is a kingdom. Supreme Court, highest court in the nation. Bill, a law proposed by Congress. Veto, when the president rejects a bill passed by Congress. Override, when Congress votes to overturn a presidential veto. And judicial review, when the Supreme Court decides whether a law is constitutional. And that's about it. Any other comments or questions, Lana, Sabrina, anything?
This is a good class.
Oh, thank you. Your points were very well taken. Good points that you made. I'm glad you brought those up. Sabrina, do you have any comments you'd like to make or questions?
Sabrina, you're actually muted right now. So if you click off of that mute button, we'll be able to hear you. I think
Now?
there you
Now?
go.
Oh, perfect.
Sabrina, do you have
time.
any comments or questions?
I was gonna ask if I can have a copy of that paper.
Oh, yeah, sure. Absolutely. There's also a recording of it, but I can send it to you. Yeah.
Yeah, please.
Okay.
Like
Is that
that.
Kara's okay?
What?
Absolutely. I can make sure that Sabrina gets a copy of it if you want to email it to me, and I can email it to you, Sabrina.
Okay,
Yeah,
awesome.
absolutely. And Sabrina, do you have any questions?
No, what was her name again? The person that just talked? She's pretty much right, and I agree. Yeah, I don't really have much to say about that.
Okay. And Lana, do you have anything else you'd like to talk about?
No, I mean, like I said, it's just I learned something new. So this is a pretty good class.
Oh, good,
This is good.
And I
good.
like the
Thank
way you broke it up in stages, so it's better to understand because
you.
I have a hard time understanding the legislative and the executive and everything else.
Oh, okay. Do you want me, do you want me to review any of it right
Yeah,
now?
yeah, if it's okay, if it's fine.
Okay, you're fine with it right now? Okay. All
No,
right.
if you want to mention it again, I can pay attention again. So,
Oh, you want me to, okay. Just
but
the part,
the very beginning where I missed.
oh, okay, okay. Lana, you can stay or leave. It's up to you because Sabrina missed a few parts of it. I don't remember when you came in, Sabrina. Do you remember which slide we were on by any chance?
I was in 2:15.
I'm sorry, what?
2:15 I came in.
2:15. Okay. Okay, so I'll start at the beginning. Okay,
Okay.
there are three branches of government, and why the whole purpose was to protect against tyranny. And the United States Constitution requires a system of separation of powers to ensure checks and balances. Okay.
Okay.
And tyranny is basically a cruel and oppressive government. Another term is dictatorship, is basically a synonym of tyranny. And like we were talking about before, our founding fathers, the whole point was to get to get away from Great Britain because they considered King George as a tyrant. And that's why they fought the Revolutionary War, also called the War of Independence, because King George III was ruling over the United States. It wasn't called the United States then, it was a colony of Great Britain. And they felt that he was very oppressive and that he was committing crimes against America. So in the Declaration of Independence, they listed his many crimes against America, including establishing an absolute tyranny over the states. And
Okay.
ab-
Gotcha.
absolute power means the king holds all power and can do whatever he pleases. So there were no checks on his power. Okay, so the basic.
That's the one that I missed. Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
so you're okay now.
Yeah, U.S. constitutional provision. Okay. Yeah, she'll send me the Kara will send me the email anyhow, but I understand now.
Okay, you're good now. Okay, great.
Yeah. Yeah, I got it.
Okay, great. Okay, well, thanks for participating today.
Mhm.
Well, thank you. I look forward to our next class.
Okay.
Yeah.